Welcome back, everybody, and today we're going to continue on our journey in China and talk about the achievements and society of the Han and the Qin. Now, we had talked about kind of the roles of men and women that had been developed during the earlier Chinese dynasties, most particularly that including the establishment of a male-dominated society. But the interesting thing that gets developed at this time is actually texts that are created to support those ideas and to kind of further them to really, in many cases, down to today. And one of these incredible, I guess you could say, manuals for this is the Classic of Filial Piety. What the idea of here is that this is something written by Confucian scholars, and we said that Confucius was kind of in favor of this, of how the society should work. In other words, really specifying the role of men in society, why they need to be in charge of it, and the idea of the subordination of women and how that all needs to actually kind of work. And you got to understand, and we kind of act like this today, when you get something that's like a bestseller, if you will, and this Classic of Filial Piety was, it really becomes ingrained in the society. And once it gets ingrained, it can take forever to get out. And the fact of the matter in China is it's just not going to do that. And then we're going to continue on that line, and you have another publication called the Admonitions for Women by a woman by the name of Zhao. Now, here's an interesting thing. This is a manual that is written by a woman, okay? And this was an upper class woman that really focused on what women need to do to be successful. And in the end, what women needed to do to be successful was to have a lot of humility, obedience, and subservience to her husband and other men. And ultimately, that all came down to like this ultimate devotion. Now, first of all, let's talk about the incredible aspect that this woman clearly was educated and she could read and write, yet wrote this book that put her gender in a distinctive, discriminatory position. And I think what that really can tell us is to really show how ingrained this idea of women being subservient to men was. Is it every man thinking this way? No, but it becomes the standard, and you can see it on how the emperors act toward women by having those huge brothels and numbers of concubines, and really this gets set in at this time, and there's no looking back. Now, also, what finally gets over into China at this time is iron metallurgy. It really took a long, long time, but iron metallurgy would be huge. You see here a modern-day blacksmith. They're going to use it for tools, which will increase their plows, and if you have better plows, you can farm more land, and if you have more land, you have more food, and you have more food, and you have more people. It really is incredible, but here is the big thing, is that they're going to use it to make military items, most notably armor, swords, and spears, and actually iron-tipped arrows, and the Chinese will get steel fairly on the quick, and it's this development of iron technology that will allow them to defeat the Xiongnu after the Xiongnu put a beat down on them for a while. So once again, you can actually see the shift in technology allowing for greater strength for the empire. Silk, my goodness, this is absolutely huge. This becomes the industry for like ever. What's really weird is what you really don't know is that silk are these strands of saliva that are made by a special worm that lives on mulberry trees. There's something about the leaves that they eat which allows them to produce these extra fine strands of silk that are able to be eventually woven into fabric. Of course, modern day, this is going to be, synthetic, but what's so huge here is that what this is going to become is the biggest industry in China, and silk becomes so sought after that it becomes, in many cases, the basis of Chinese economics. It is what the trade routes that you're going to be talking about soon were built, the idea of getting to China to get this silk, and actually Chinese silk eventually would find its way all the way to Rome. Now, no Chinese person ever got to Rome, but still, this is pretty incredible. So silk, absolutely big, big time fabric. But The biggest invention was the invention of paper by this man Ts'ai Lun around the year 105. We don't know much about Ts'ai Lun. We know that he was a government employee, also a little bit of an inventor, and this might be the most important invention in humankind really since the wheel. And let me explain to you why. Paper is huge because it is a really effective manner in which you can transfer knowledge. What he did is he took hemp fibers, bark, and some textiles and cooked them down. And what that made it into was pulp. What he then did with that pulp is that he would flatten it out into sheets and then dry it. Prior to this, paper was actually, or not paper, but books were made on bamboo, which made them heavy and expensive, or they would use a papyrus type thing, and that just takes forever, or sometimes they would print on silk, but silk doesn't last, it actually deteriorates over time. And why is paper so important? Paper is a cheap writing medium, so it is easy to do. You can write more and you can then have the idea of books. Books putting paper together, they're lightweight, they're easily portable. When you have more books and you have more writing, now you have greater amounts of literacy. If you have greater amounts of literacy, then that will expand and you give people more access to knowledge. When you have more knowledge, then you have more overall success. So you can see how it falls down. Look at it this way, the Europeans don't have paper. After Rome, they fall into the Dark Ages. The biggest invention of the European era in the Renaissance was the invention of the printing press, which used paper. Paper spread knowledge, and there we go. So it's really hard to underestimate or undervalue paper. We look at it as a basic everyday thing, but it is absolutely, paradigm shifting, if you will, in the sense of spread of knowledge. And it doesn't get any better than that. It is also during this time that we get our first big population boom in China that they won't look back on. As I said before, with the plow, they can farm more land, they get better agriculture, they have stability. That's what these empires really bring, is stability. You don't have people fighting and killing each other, and so during the early Qin, you only had about 20 million people in China, but then you get to the Han, and when the end of the Han, they now triple at to 60 million, and they're never going to look back. Eventually, though, what ends up bringing these guys down, particularly when we get to the Han period, are social and economic issues. As we said, the Han were constantly fighting nomads, and fighting nomads costs a lot of money. If the government needs money, what do? They then tax, and they tax in the way of food, or they actually take away land. And sometimes it takes away land from the wealthy people. Now, the problem with this is that these wealthy landowners were actually also the ones that were developing the early manufacturing, which was then used for trade. So when you're taking away the agricultural base, that eventually is going to go into the manufacturing base, and then the economy is going to peter out. What that then goes into, now we get into our societal concerns, is that this develops a big gap between the rich and the poor. And it doesn't help that the wealthy, because they felt they were special, because they were some of the ones that were surviving all of these cutbacks, began to flaunt their wealth, which increased tensions in the population. Then what you end up happening is that the wealthy will start to buy up land, and then instead of employing people, they will start to seek out slaves from military conquest or the nomads or something like that. That results in people having no money to spend, as well as falling and becoming poor. So then you start to get some uprisings, which will lead to instability, which then leads to that government fracturing, and then boom, the Han are gone. But when you look at the Han and the Qin, you see these amazing things that they established. The establishment of China, the spread of their government system that lasts for 2,000 years, Han taking it to the next level, expanding out their land, getting trade that goes all the way to Rome, the development of the crossbow, iron, paper, and silk, and in the end, China is just going to be a juggernaut, really, guys, until about the 1500s. All right, let's get a comment, make sure we have our questions, and I'll see you tomorrow.